compounded GLPs like semaglutide, are they legit and are they legal? First, what is compounding? Compounding generally means the preparation by a pharmacist or licensed person under supervision of a pharmacist of custom medications tailored to meet the specific needs of a patient that cannot be met with commercially available drugs. Some examples of how a pharmacist can customize medications based off of a prescription from a provider to meet a specific patient's needs are when that drug doesn't come in a certain dosage form or certain strength. So sometimes if a patient can't swallow a pill, like they have dysphagia, or maybe the oral formulation is causing some nausea, the pharmacist can prepare it in like a liquid or maybe even a topical or suppository. An example of a drug we do this with is the beta blocker atenolol. It comes as a 25, 50, and 100 milligram tablet. When we need to use this drug in like infants or pediatrics, the dose can be as low as like 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram per day. So we can compound this as an oral suspension. We can also reformulate a drug to exclude an excipient or a non-active ingredient like lactose or gelatin or even like dyes. Maybe a patient's allergic to the dye. Compounding is honestly really cool. Compounding pharmacists are total baddies. Like we gotta make sure like if we're switching something to like a topical formulation or a sublingual formulation, is it getting adequate bioavailability? It requires a lot of drug knowledge. We learned how to create compounds and what each excipient did and how to have like acid-base balance and pH buffers and stuff in our dosage forms lab course. And we also learned what chemical structures produce like certain tastes, like amines are bitter. So we learned how to reformulate certain drugs to make them more palpable. But anyway, compounding does not include making copies of commercially available drug products. For the most part. I'm gonna go into definitions and exceptions in a little bit. An example of a drug that I've compounded before is Mary's Magic mouthwash. It's for stomatitis or oral sores due to chemo. A standard recipe is a mix of 60 ml of nystatin suspension, 1500 milligrams of tetracycline that we get from opening up the capsules, 60 milligrams of hydrocortisone, which is a steroid, and 180 ml of diphenhydramine or Benadryl. But before I get going and talking about when you can compound commercially available drug products, I'm gonna thank today's sponsor, Levity. And disclaimer, I don't do brand deals with garbage companies and garbage products, so don't go and cancel me now. But for real, I'll be caught dead before I go repping some Prevagen or homeopathy or some oscillococcinum crap. But anyway, Levity is a company that connects telehealth to telepharmacy. So they connect you to a provider to prescribe like Mounjaro, Ozempic, Wegovy, and compounded semaglutide. Strive is one of their 503A compounding pharmacies that they use to obtain this drug. It undergoes a state board of pharmacy inspection, which grants accreditation to compound sterile products. They're also legit script certified, meaning you're in contact with a legitimate medical provider and a legitimate pharmacy. But GLPs are one of the best drugs on the market, full stop. I talked about mechanism of action, interactions, cardiovascular risk reduction, and then how patients are losing like 15 to 20% of their body weight after just a year. They're currently in clinical trials for OSA, OA, MASH, renal outcomes, and heart failure with preserved ejection fraction in patients who are overweight. There's a lot of expensive and branded and newer drugs in the market that don't have any like clinical superiority over older like other drugs that are much cheaper. This is not one of them. This is a blockbuster drug. Levity offers compounded semaglutide, which is the active drug product in Ozempic and Wegovy, at $225 a month. And when you use my promo code, KD50, you get $50 off. So $175 for your first month. The biggest issues I see with adherence is 1, not being able to find a provider, and 2, not being able to afford the drug. Branded semaglutide, Ozempic, and Wegovy are majorly not covered with insurance, or at least without a PA, and then even after the PA, it could be like $500 and $600. Cash price, it runs like $1,100 or $1,200. That's crazy, that's like my rent. But also, now my ex, who's also a pharmacist, asking me if she should try this. I said yeah, like should I tag her? She's a clout chaser, not gonna lie. So if you're watching this, Holly-Ann, promo code KD50. But anyway, I'm gonna show you how to inject this. First, wash your hands with soap and water. Second, choose your injection site. So like the belly or the thigh. Don't get excited now, y'all. Not gonna have my belly out on the main for free, so you gotta use your imagination. But make sure you're rotating your injection sites. It can be in the same area, but not like the same exact site. Next step, boom. You wanna get an alcohol swab, and then boom. Then you're gonna get your syringe. What we're going to do is we're going to pull back our dose in air. This is to equalize the pressure in the vial. So for example, if your dose is 1/2 ml, I pulled back 1/2 ml, and then we go whoop, right into the vial. You're going to want to flip it upside down and insert that air. Make sure your needle is under the liquid, and then pull back your dose. I kind of like to flick out the air bubbles to make sure I'm getting the right dose. Choose your injection site and boop, all the way in. Hold it maybe for 5 seconds, make sure all the drug gets out. Some fancy syringes have like you push on the bottom and the needle comes back into the syringe. For this one, it doesn't have that mechanism, so what you do is you scoop the needle. You don't use 2 hands to prevent needle stick injuries. So scoop. You can also just put it directly in a jug anyway. But yeah, empty jug, that's where your needles go. Or I guess like a needle disposal box. They have them in like the diabetic section of your pharmacy. So now we're gonna go over some laws. There are 2 sections that I'm gonna go over in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that address human drug compounding. 503A applies to compounding pharmacies. 503B applies to outsourcing facilities. I'm gonna go over 503A. 503A states that compounding pharmacies must comply with State Board of Pharmacy regulations as well as USP 795 and 797 guidelines, or non-sterile and sterile compounding guidelines, or standards. 503 specifically states that compounded products must be prepared by a licensed pharmacist and a licensed state pharmacy pursuant to a prescription for a specific patient. Bulk drug substances used must be accompanied by a valid certificate of analysis and must have been manufactured by an establishment registered by the FDA under Section 510. Compounding pharmacies cannot compound drugs that are too difficult to compound, like liposome drug products, or drug products that have been removed or withdrawn from the market because they've been proven to be unsafe or not effective. This part right here is important. Basically, drug products that are compounded by compounding pharmacies through 503A under Section 505 do not need to be FDA approved. Next is, can we compound commercially available drug products? The answer is sometimes, but when? We do not consider a drug to be commercially available if the drug is currently in shortage. You can go to the FDA's website to see what drugs are currently in shortage. Right now, Semaglutide is currently in shortage, meaning that we can legally compound this product. Also point out another interesting and important part of 503A. A compounded drug product is not essentially a copy of a commercially available drug product if a change is made for an identified individual patient and the prescribing practitioner has determined that the change will produce a significant difference for that patient. This is why you see some Semaglutide formulations being mixed with vitamins like B12. B12 is added to try and mitigate the nausea and vomiting from Semaglutide. I believe compounding pharmacies are doing this in order to legally still be able to compound this drug once it comes off a shortage. In my opinion, this is legal. I like this chart, but this is how the FDA generally intends to determine whether a compounded drug is essentially a copy of a commercially available drug. But people saying that compounded Semaglutide isn't legit because it's not FDA approved is just crazy. Compounded drugs by nature are not FDA approved. They are exempt, they are legitimate, and they are legal. It is purposeful that compounded products get to bypass the entire FDA approval process. It's an exemption under 505 of 503A. Again, this is how we make drugs more accessible to patients who have certain limitations, and then also when drugs go on back order. Drug companies want market exclusivity, so they will continue to fearmonger, lie, and bully compounding pharmacies into not making and selling the same product at substantially lower prices, even though it's legal. Drug companies want to continue to charge an arm and a leg and a liver and keep their patients on their product versus compounded Semaglutide, despite it being unavailable and on back order. This is just wild to me. Pharmacies have not been able to get in like Ozempic and Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound for months. But here we have drug companies threatening legal action against little compounding pharmacies, trying to scare them into not making their product anymore. Drug companies don't care about innovation or what's in the best interest of their patients. They care about profits. You will see some hesitancy with practitioners when it comes to prescribing compounded products because they don't understand the legalities surrounding compounded products, and then they believe the lies that corporations tell. I will mention that there is some merit to this, like with counterfeit products online that aren't regulated. That's why it's important to purchase legitimate GLPs pursuant to a prescription from a legitimate provider from legitimate pharmacies. Another way to see if a pharmacy is legitimate is if they're PCAB accredited or Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board. Compounding pharmacies aren't just some dude buying it off the black market, diluting it with tap water and stuffing it in a vial to sell it. They buy the API or active pharmaceutical ingredient, Semaglutide, through FDA approved and registered facilities. They prepare it for patient usage, for example, diluting it, adjusting the pH, and then also sterilizing it. Again, these are licensed compounding pharmacists working in licensed compounding pharmacies. I'm all for increased access to medications, and GLPs are on my list of favorite medications.